Alright, hello again. So for this tutorial, we're going to focus a little more on the coding side of the Arduino. So to start things off, I have this little piece of code that will be, again, in the description, but I'm just going to run through it and explain everything that's going on in this code. This program that I'm making here is going to have 3 different ways that lights are going to act, kind of like in a Christmas tree, how you have lights that can, just stay full on all the time, or they'll kind of flash a little bit, or they'll dim in and out, that kind of thing. Except I'm going to do it with LEDs. To start things off, I've made something called an array. An array is basically a normal little variable like you see here into LED, except I have added in this 10. And what that means is that I have basically made it so that there is a list of 10 different values in an array. And an array is basically a whole bunch of values put into one variable. So, as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 values in this array. In the actual making of this, I only used 9 LEDs. But in the programming, I used 10, so you could have up to 10 LEDs and it would still work. So after that, I have set up the pin mode for the LEDs. And to do this, I use something called a for loop right here. A for loop is set up just as any other with any other function or anything with a opening of these little squiggly parentheses and a closing one at the end right there. And so inside these brackets for the for loop, I have to initialize a new variable. In this case, I just called it I for simplicity's sake, and I initialize it at 0. And I say that, after putting a colon, I say that when, or as long as I is less than 10, so this little spot here basically says as long as I is less than 10, you could change that to as long as I is greater than 0 or something like that, depending on what you want to use the for statement for. But in this case, we need to use it as long as I is less than 10, because we don't want it to go above 10, as there's only 10 lights. And we say I plus plus. So we started off at 0 because arrays will always start off at 0 and then they'll go to 1, etc. When you call an array, you basically call it like this, with LED and then in the brackets say 0. Or you would call it as LED and then 1, something like that. So for this, we basically have LED of I, and since I is constantly being added on, that's what the I++ is for, every time it goes through the for loop, it adds one onto I and then starts over again, and until it reaches the point at 10. And then I will no longer be less than 10, so then it will move on and exit the for loop. So the pin mode here, we see that the LED of I basically means that it is going to be whatever value this is. So the first time around, it'll be the LED at 0, which will be pin 3, and it sets that to output. The next time around, it'll be LED of 1, since 1 will have been added on, and then that will be pin 4, as you can see there, and that will set it to an output. And it'll basically do that and go through for all of the pins in the array. Next, we have something called a function. So the first function that we have is called flash lights, and this basically makes the lights flash on, flash off. So to start things off, I basically make a for loop to set all the lights, all the LED lights in there that are in the array to be off, just to reset it so that in case there are any on, they just got all set off. And then I get into the heart of it, which is to go through every other light and turn it all on, and then delay for half a second, and then to turn them all off, and then right away turn the other lights on, the other half of the lights on, wait half a second, and then turn them all off. And then that's that function. The next function, and as you can see, naming functions is basically just like making a loop or something, except you put the function name right in there, and just for now we'll just leave these parentheses blank. And then we have the for loop that turns them all off again, just in case there are any left on. And then we turn every third light on, wait for 350 milliseconds, then turn every third light off. Then right away turn the other every third lights on, and then wait every 350 seconds, and then turn the other third lights off, and then do that for the last again. And as you can see, we start at different I values so that it goes to the next set of the lights rather than the same one. And then finally at the bottom we have the last function, which is called count lights, which basically puts one light on, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. So what that does is, so as you can see here, it resets them to all be off. Then here it goes through the loop, turns one on, waits a second, turns the next one on, waits a second, turns the next one on, waits a second. So all the ones that are already on will stay on, and then I'll keep adding ones on. And then after that, what it'll do is it'll start to flash them. It'll turn them all on high, wait for 40 milliseconds, turn them all low, and then wait for another 40 milliseconds, so it'll flash really fast. And then at the very bottom of the program, you see where we finally actually play it. And that is right here with the loop. And all we have to do to call them is to do that. This isn't really a very good in-depth explanation of all the programming. If you really want to learn more about it, about this kind of programming, I would recommend taking something like Code Academy to kind of get a feel for programming as it is, and then using some online guides to learn about Arduino programming. I'm not really going to get much into it myself, but I'm sure I will include some resources in the description that you can use to learn programming. So here you can basically see the program running on the Arduino, and as long as you did all the coding right, which if you downloaded the code straight from the description, then it should be correct. Then it should be working fine. Now, if the wiring for it is basically the same as the last tutorial I did, the blinking lights program, and the only difference is that there's 9 lights here connected rather than just 1. You could have 10 lights connected if you want. Now, it's basically the exact same connection, just instead of connecting to pin 3 for the second one, you connect it to pin 4, and then connect one to pin 5, etc, etc, each individually on the next pin. And then you basically have the coding for this complete. And it just went through full cycle as you saw. Remember to check into the description if you need any coding help or things like that. As always, comment if you need any extra help, and I'll be happy to respond.